watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and what a show we have lined up for you. What a day it has been of big news stories and developments. But let's start with the prime focus on the show today, which is of course part 3 in a sense of the unveiling of the 20 lakh crore rupee package. Now we know that there have been these daily press conferences by the finance minister who has been focusing on different sectors each day. Today was the agri sector, a lot of points mentioned over there in the press conference. Let me give you the gist of it. A broad range of announcements which begin from some kind of regulatory changes. So for example, taking out some items from the essential commodities list, then extending finance to focus on infrastructure in agriculture. The theme is very clear, and this is really the important part. The theme is that we will empower you, we will not give in to entitlement kind of policy making. So there will be measures which give you easy loans, which give you easy fundings, but no cash, no dole, quote unquote. And this is something which has been echoed by the finance minister, by several ministers in the government, as well as by the chief economic advisor in a conversation with ET Now just today. The theme seems to be very clear. The question is this the right approach? Before we move forward to discuss this in detail, let's just play out for you those key excerpts of what both the finance minister and the chief economic advisor said about this today.
Everywhere, the underlying principle is to empower people, give them resources so that they can produce for themselves and have a livelihood for themselves, rather than go only on entitlements. Where entitlements are due, yes, they will be given. But largely, our focus is making sure India stands up on its own. India is able to be helped to stand up on its own, in turn generate more jobs and so on. So you find a lot more giving of empowering people through creation of skills, creation of logistics and so on.
India has done the same as well. If you take between the fiscal and the monetary side, and on the liquidity as well, we clearly had more space on the monetary side. And given that we have a lot of state-owned institutions as well, by giving them some capital or through a guarantee, etc., we can leverage and and have far significant impact without necessarily constraining our fiscal side too much, because there's also the concern of possible impact on the ratings, etc., which is why I had actually also mentioned in one of my comments that there is no free lunch.
So in theory, that sounds like the best possible plan. You can't, don't keep feeding the fisherman, teach him how to fish kind of economics. The question is this the right time for that? How is this 20 lakh crore rupee being broken down? How much of it is actual, fiscal sort of moves? How much of it is padding up moves and regulatory frameworks? To break all of that down, I'm joined now by top economist and the first vice chairman of the Niti Aayog, Arvind Panagariya. Mr. Panagariya, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Hope you're doing well.
I'm quite well. Thank you, Tamanna. All well. Thank you for having me on your show.
All right, let me start off with the basic question that I have raised. And this theme is now pretty much clear from the 3 press conferences that have taken place so far, that there will be no free lunch for anybody. There will be, and the finance minister said there will be entitlements where they are required, but the plan is we will give you soft loans, we will give you the means and tools to empower yourself, and then you find a way to stand on your own feet. It's a great idea in theory. My question is now the time for that kind of tough love?
Tamanna, my take on this has been, during the crisis, what the government needs to do is to ensure that companies, entrepreneurs, firms, they remain afloat. What can happen is that, even the companies that really ought to survive in the long run may go bankrupt because of liquidity problems, and that needs to be prevented. And I think, largely that philosophy has guided the three packages or three sub-packages of the overall package that has been given out. On the philosophy, this is very much close to the way I think about it, that at the end of the day, the government's capacity to pass out entitlement, meaning, free cash, is going to be limited. At the end of the day, you need tax revenues to finance those. You can borrow a little bit, but that is also a tax liability on the future generations. So there is no getting around that particular fact. So how much, unless the economy generates enough wealth, and therefore the government is able to raise revenues, you can't go out of your way to pass on cash, meaning, transfers. That is, that it may not be cash, it may be in kind, but transfer. So there are limits to that. So in this sense, and I also think ultimately that, development is all about it's all about unleashing the energies of the people, energies of the entrepreneurs, farmers, and so forth. And that's what we need to do. And in that sense, I personally think that, the package is on the right track. It also, by the way, joins back now in my mind after listening to the way the finance minister talked today, to what the prime minister had said about self-reliance. So at the end, I think, there is a connection here that, look, self-reliance really means that help yourself. We will assist you in the way that the government ought to assist you. But otherwise, you need to help yourself too, rather than we making you or the government making transfers in very large volumes. So, yeah. Yes.
That's an interesting connection, Mr. Panagariya. Atmanirbharta at all levels. Atmanirbhar Bharat, and each individual and every section should also be Atmanirbhar. All truisms. My question is the context, and also the fact that the banking system is what is now being used as the funnel to really get this aid to different sections. Now that whole funnel seems to not have been very efficient so far. We know that liquidity sitting with banks, not going to businesses that require it. There is a fearfulness of taking credit risk on, and into this mix you throw in, for example, street vendors now who have to be extended 10,000 rupees. You don't know where they stay, you don't know what they're going to sell today and what they're going to sell tomorrow. Do you really see that as the right medium to funnel this aid? Also the appetite for any kind of loan when there is an uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about demand.
Right. So look, this is where it comes back to that where is the demand, right? So if you throw in too much money, and also where is the supply, meaning that if people are not there at the workplaces, then you can't generate supply. And if you can't generate supply, then generating extra demand even by transfers is not going to go very far. So there's a whole, this is a very, very unusual kind of shock that we have, where both demand and supply have been impacted. So that's one. In the first part of the package, there was a 3 trillion rupees, 3 lakh crore rupees allocated for loans, which would be completely collateral free. And the government is giving 100% guarantee to the banks, not just on principal, but also on interest. And so those loans, I think, can move pretty fast. Likewise, when you said street vendors, no collateral is required, so that can move fast. Remember here, there is actually a fiscal backstop to all this. Ultimately, the government is standing behind. Whenever collateral-free loan is given, which is guaranteed by the government, in effect, there is a government fiscal backstop that at the end of the day, some of this is going to end up on the government books directly or indirectly. So there is a fiscal element to it. We don't see it because, some of it at present may be off budget. But ultimately, it will come on the budget in terms of the interest that has to be paid in terms of guarantees that will have to be made good, that the government will have to make good on. So I think there is that. Plus, let us also not underestimate, I think, in the package, a lot of reforms have been tucked in as well. And to me, I think that's very important that, we have taken the unusual step of also doing some of the key reforms as a part of the package.
No, absolutely. I want to talk a bit about this fiscal backstop and, extend it to the question of fiscal limitation. Very important point made by the Chief Economic Advisor when he was in conversation with ET Now today, talking about the lurking, I wouldn't say fear, but awareness that our sovereign ratings will take a hit if we let the fiscal deficit go out of control. It's not as easy as printing money and, giving it to everyone who needs it right now. And do you think that that is a very real concern?
Oh, that certainly is a very real concern because, in the since January, easily about 20 countries have experienced a credit rating reduction by Fitch. These are, largely emerging market economies. So that threat lurks in the background. And in fact, the Fitch had made a statement that they are looking at the possibility of knocking down India's rating. So the government has made the very wise decision, and it is bold actually. At one point, I was okay that, if in the end, part of this funding has to come from printing money in this kind of situation, that would be sort of okay. I mean, I was willing to do that, go with it for at least one time possibility, but I give government a lot of credit that so far it has actually not resorted to that. I mean, that ought to be the last resort, and that's how the government seems to be playing.
So then the basic question is that at this time of great need, and there is no doubt that there is a great need on every section. The government is not in an enviable position right now. You have, the informal sector, migrant workers who need help. You have MSMEs who need help. You have big businesses who need help. There are either entire sectors whose future is not visible right now. What does the government then really do to ensure that we survive this?
I think largely the government is doing what needs to be done. You can, complain on the edges. Naturally, unexpected things happen, and not every part of the government is equally efficient. But by and large, broadly speaking, my view has been that the government has done an excellent job. And this is how, meaning also this approach that let's see how the reality unfolds is an important one. I think that the major place at which we have had some breakdowns was in dealing with the migrant situation. But other than that, we will have to keep going to see how the COVID situation unfolds. Now, in terms of can the government be more aggressive in opening the economy? I suppose it could be, at least in the green zones and even parts of yellow zones where the number of cases have been, like 10 or 15 at the district level. So 10 or 15 cases in a very large district are not that many, and one can handle them by quarantine and so forth. So I think that's where possibilities exist that, one can maybe this will happen after 18th May. That we could be a bit more aggressive in opening up and letting the workers get back to work. Of course, some of the most intense areas of economic activity are also the most impacted by COVID. And there the government will have to continue to exercise some caution. Though here also some selectivity is possible that, if you find a case or two in a particular building, you need to quarantine only that building. You don't have to quarantine the entire locality. So those are the kinds of things you can do. But, central government can't do these things. It really ultimately has to be handled by the state governments and the local administrations.
That's another very important aspect of this whole situation. What central government does, what state government does, and how they coordinate with each other. You spoke about the migrant worker situation a little while ago, Mr. Panagariya. And I think that's a prime example of, dropping the ball between deciding who's in charge, the central government or the state government. And in a sense, waiting for the other person to take charge. How crucial will this kind of coordination be if we have to really smoothen things going forward, and especially opening up the economy, because now we know we have to live with COVID-19 for some time.
Yes, yes. No, I think that is the key issue, that we have got to live with COVID for a little while. And this is why the learning that we have done in the last 2 months is extremely important. We ought to make use of it. Coordination, of course, is very important. But more than coordination, it is that each level of administration ought to feel its own responsibility. See, coordination can't be one way. So therefore, the responsibility has to be felt at all levels. And I think that has been done. Save the situation of migrants, which, again, one has to recognize that this is the first time we have dealt with this kind of situation. There are always glitches when you're faced with, first time with any major kind of dislocation. I'm reminded of, at that time when under Prime Minister Vajpayee, we had to deal with this hijacking. And in the end, we ended up releasing those terrorists from the Indian prisons. That was the first time we had to deal with it. But once we had dealt with it second time, we were much better prepared. When 26/11 happened, the government did not give in to the terrorists. So similarly, I think, likewise, COVID, this is the first time we've dealt with this kind of pandemic. Second time, we'll be much better prepared. If you look at the countries which have done well, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, even Vietnam, these are all countries, China, they had all dealt with this pandemic or at least epidemic situation at least once before. So they were prepared. So I think we will be better prepared also for migration, for dealing with any kind of epidemic also. Although I, again, should emphasize that we have done quite well, actually, and if you look at the number of deaths, which you cannot hide, we have contained them absolutely fantastically. Look at the American numbers, past 80,000 today, and ours are still below 3,000. So the government deserves a lot of credit for what it has been able to do without any prior preparation, really, because everyone was taken by surprise.
Yes. So, that's the double-edged sword. We have managed to keep the numbers down because we went into an early lockdown and a very severe one. The side effect of that early and severe lockdown has been huge distress on the economic front all over the place. You and I are speaking on, just counting down to the end of lockdown 3.0. We'll now see lockdown 4.0. Just, your word on how lockdown 4.0 needs to look so that we can balance this lives and livelihood situation.
Again, we need to be careful in looking at this, Tamanna, because it's not that we were too soon and too hard of a lockdown. It's not. If you look at the economic conditions elsewhere, the US has had less severe lockdown, perhaps not as early as it should have. It's still suffering. If you look at the employment rates, they've really skyrocketed 3 times of what they were in the immediate post financial crisis period. So we're not the ones. Also, remember that, if we had delayed and, for example, the deaths had spiked, then eventually the economic impact would have been much worse. So it is a calculated move. We would never know what would have been too early or just about right timing of it and so forth. So, but going forward, I think now we know a bit more and all. We also have beefed up our defenses quite a bit now in terms of the health infrastructure, including everything. And so now I think we can, green districts. I see no reason why any restrictions are required for movement of workers, at least within districts. And if there are 2 or more green districts that are adjoining to each other, then inter-district, between district movement can also be allowed fully, actually freely. Even in yellow districts where your cases are fewer than, let's say 15 or something, then simply allow the movement and restrict the movement of those who are impacted, quarantine those. So that will really leave the hotspots and districts that are very tight. I mean, obviously, where you are sitting, Bombay is India's New York in a way, New York City where I'm sitting. So there, I think will obviously take a lot longer. But again, I think some basic things can be easily done. For example, there's no reason to restrict the movement of online deliveries to only essential commodities. I think we have to open up, New York, here in the US, we never stopped the non-essential items delivery online. I mean, the actual shopping centers are all closed, but online deliveries, these kinds of things we can do. We can be more liberal in those areas.
Absolutely, and I guess a more coordinated plan, not a haphazard sort of a little reform here, one announcement there. We can absolutely use this as an opportunity, as has been stated again and again. Thank you so much, Mr. Panagariya, for joining us on the first big discussion this evening on the show.